My daughter, who stole her sister's college fund, now wants us to help save her house from the bank, but I like the bank more. I want to share one of the most difficult and painful experiences I've had as a mother. I've been dealing with the betrayal and selfishness of my eldest daughter, and I feel completely lost. What has led me to write this is a recent blowout between my eldest daughter, Melanie, and the rest of the family. After years of estrangement, everything exploded just a week ago. I know that by telling this story, I risk coming across as a bad mother, but I need to vent and gain some perspective, as I'm on the verge of an emotional breakdown. My father was always very close to my two daughters. Before he passed away, he often told me how concerned he was about their future, especially when it came to their education. My husband and I were already saving to send both of them to college, but my father wanted to ensure that they wouldn't have to worry about finances when the time came. That's why, when Melanie was around 16 and my younger daughter, Olivia, was about to turn 10, my father decided to create a savings fund that would be exclusively for their college education. This gesture was a huge relief for us. However, he made a mistake that, although I warned him at the time, I couldn't prevent. My father decided to put the money in a joint account under both of their names, without setting up a trust or any formal legal structure to protect that money. My father, being the trusting man he was, believed there was no need to involve lawyers or complicate things. He said the money belonged to his granddaughters, and they would know how to manage it. Even when I suggested setting clear boundaries to avoid future problems, he told me, "My granddaughters love each other. They would never hurt one another." My husband and I didn't share his optimism. Although my daughters had always gotten along well, we knew that money can cause conflicts in any family, no matter how close they are. But in the end, it wasn't our money, and we couldn't do more than offer advice. The decision had been made. My father passed away a few years later, and just as he had said, the money was left in that joint account under both their names. At that time, we tried once again to prevent any future issues. We suggested to Melanie, who was then 18, that it would be best to divide the money into two separate accounts, one for her and one for her sister Olivia. We explained that this way, they could avoid any confusion or misunderstandings later on. However, Melanie was the first to reject the idea. She said it wasn't necessary, and that they both knew the money was for their education, nothing more. Olivia, being younger and seeing her older sister as someone to look up to, said she trusted her completely. Both insisted so strongly that we decided not to push the matter. My husband and I didn't want to be those parents who seemed to distrust their own children. We told ourselves that perhaps we were being too dramatic, as our daughters had accused us of being. After all, what harm could there be if they were in agreement? We trusted that Melanie would be responsible and wouldn't jeopardize her sister's academic future. Melanie was the first to attend college. She had always been very academic, achieved excellent grades, and was accepted into a prestigious private university. What we hadn't anticipated was how quickly she started spending the money. At first, I thought everything was fine. She paid her tuition, housing, books, and all those expenses one associates with college. However, as the semesters progressed, I began to notice the account draining faster than we had expected. One day, concerned, I decided to talk to Melanie. I reminded her that the money wasn't just hers, that it also belonged to her sister Olivia, who would need it when her turn came to go to college. With the confidence of someone who seemed to have everything under control, she told me she knew, and that she just needed a bit more from the account, but once she started working, she would pay back everything she had taken from her sister's share. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe she was mature enough to handle the situation. So, I accepted her promise and thought everything would work out in time. However, a few months later, the joint account was completely emptied. The money my father had left for both of them had vanished overnight. After our conversation, Melanie had stopped withdrawing money, but suddenly it was all gone. My first reaction was panic. I thought maybe someone had stolen the money or there had been some kind of fraud. My husband and I consulted a lawyer to see if there was anything we could do to protect Olivia's share, but we were informed that, since it was a joint account, both had equal rights to the money. Anything Melanie did with that money was completely legal. I decided to confront Melanie directly before taking any drastic measures. I asked her what had happened, hoping to hear that there had been some misunderstanding, but instead, she told me that she had needed the money for some unexpected expenses. She promised once again that she would pay it back as soon as she could, but this time she didn't sound convincing. My husband and I were growing more and more concerned. Shortly afterward, we discovered what had really happened. Melanie had used part of the money for a down payment on a house, which we later confirmed, but at the time, we thought it was just the down payment because there wasn't enough for an entire house. As soon as she finished college, she began posting photos of her new home on social media. My suspicions were confirmed. She had used her sister's money to buy a place for herself. That was the final blow. My eldest daughter had stolen from her own sister the money my father had specifically left for her education. My husband and I decided that the best course of action was to cut off all contact with Melanie. It wasn't an easy decision. It hurt us deeply to know that one of our daughters had betrayed the other in such a way. But we felt that we couldn't let that behavior go unpunished, especially since Melanie never showed any remorse or tried to make it up to Olivia for what she had done. She never apologized, never acknowledged the harm she had caused. Despite everything, we moved forward. My husband and I had been saving for years for our daughter's education, and although the initial plan was for that money to be used by both daughters, we decided that those savings would be used solely for Olivia. It wasn't fair that she should pay the price for her sister's selfishness. Thanks to those savings, Olivia was able to start college without major financial problems. We knew it was the right thing to do, but even so, the wound left by Melanie didn't heal. Several years passed without any contact with her. We thought that, in time, maybe she would realize her mistake, apologize, and try to make amends. But that never happened. Then, just a week ago, everything exploded again. Somehow, Melanie found out that Olivia had started college. I don't know how she found out, but her first reaction was to call her younger sister. She directly asked how she had managed to pay for her tuition, whether she had taken out a loan or gotten a scholarship. Olivia explained that we had used the savings we had set aside for her. She also reminded her, quite rightly, that after Melanie had taken her share of the inheritance, she had no other option. Melanie didn't take that response well. Instead of showing any remorse, she started insulting her sister, calling her stupid and saying that she had done her a favor by taking the money, as Olivia wouldn't have made the most of it anyway. She argued that Olivia wasn't as smart and that she, on the other hand, had done something more productive with that money. My younger daughter may not have the same stellar grades as Melanie, but she has always been a dedicated and hardworking girl. There's no doubt in my mind that she deserves the same opportunity for a college education as her sister. The fact that Melanie looked down on her in that way hurt more than I can express. Not satisfied with that conversation, Melanie decided to call us. This time, she spoke to my husband, who got straight to the point. Melanie wanted to claim part of the money we had saved for Olivia, arguing that she was struggling with debts, particularly her mortgage payments. To our astonishment, she confessed that while she had been able to pay the down payment on the house, the monthly payments were too high, and without financial help, she risked losing her home. My husband explained that this was not our problem. He reminded her that, years ago, she had taken all the money that rightfully belonged to her younger sister, and now the money we were using was to correct that injustice. If Melanie was now in debt, it was because she had taken money that didn't belong to her, and karma was catching up with her. Melanie tried to appeal to our emotions. She said we couldn't allow our own daughter to lose her house, and that we should help her as good parents. But my husband, with a firmness I rarely see in him, responded that what she did to her sister was not something a good sister would do either. He reminded her that my father had left that money so that both of them could study, and that Melanie decided to use it for a selfish purpose. He told her that we were determined to give Olivia the same opportunity that Melanie had. The conversation ended when Melanie told us that perhaps we weren't thinking things through clearly, and that she would come to the house to talk about it in person. My husband told her there was nothing to discuss, as we were not going to change our minds. However, yesterday was when she finally decided to make the trip. When Melanie arrived, my husband wasn't home. He had gone with Olivia to her university to help her move in, while I had to stay home for work. When I opened the door, Melanie tried to greet me as if it hadn't been so long since we last saw each other. She tried to hug me, but she couldn't. I pushed her away. I simply couldn't pretend that everything was fine. I told her that hugs were reserved for people I appreciate and consider good, and what she had done to her sister was far from noble or good. I also warned her that if she was there to discuss the same thing we talked about on the phone, the answer remained the same. There would be no more money for her. At that moment, Melanie lost her temper. She started yelling at me, telling me that I had always treated her and her sister differently. She said she knew that Olivia wasn't as smart as she was, but that I was still willing to spend money on her. She accused me of being an unfair mother. I responded that her younger sister had managed to get into a university, we didn't buy her admission, and that intelligence isn't measured solely by grades. Olivia has worked very hard to get where she is, and she deserves that opportunity, especially after what Melanie had done to her. I couldn't help but remind her that she never apologized, never tried to make it up to Olivia. It was clear that the only thing she cared about was the money. Finally, seeing that she wasn't getting what she wanted, Melanie threw one last threat before leaving. She said that if I wanted to play this game, everyone would know what kind of mother I am. I don't know what she meant by that. I don't know if she has any plan to slander me or do something else, but what I do know is that it has left me feeling uneasy. As a mother, it deeply hurts to be in this situation. I feel like I've completely lost a daughter, and worst of all, I don't know if I've done something wrong in all of this. I don't mean not giving her the money, but rather how I handled Melanie or if I could have done something differently. I guess if she wants to slander me, there's not much I can do, because I don't know what she's capable of. So, I would like to hear your advice. Update 1. I've been receiving an incredible amount of support on my original post, and it has helped me more than you can imagine. I didn't expect to update so soon, but after what happened in the last few days, I felt I needed to share. I think some of you will find it funny, and I'm sure others will already have guessed what happened. It turns out that my daughter Melanie made a post on Reddit, in a different subreddit than the one I used, obviously without knowing I was here. Apparently, some of you have already found her, because it was quite obvious that it was her. So for those who didn't know, you're now finding out. Honestly, when I found out she had written her own version of the story, I felt a certain sense of relief. I thought if she tried to defame me, she'd do it through her personal social media, but no, she chose to remain anonymous on Reddit. That gave me some peace of mind. Not that I care too much about what people online think, but the fact that she didn't use our real names lifted a weight off my shoulders. Still, obviously, both of us know who is who in the story. The thing is, her version was, well, quite distorted. In her post, she basically portrayed the situation as if my husband and I were monsters, that we had abandoned her and blatantly favored her younger sister. She said that from a young age, Olivia was always the golden child who got everything without effort, while she, Melanie, had to fight and sacrifice for everything she achieved. According to her account, we were now denying her the portion of money that rightfully belonged to her, claiming that since she had gotten a scholarship, she didn't need the money, and therefore, we could give Olivia the part that was hers. The funniest part is that Melanie didn't mention anything about using Olivia's inheritance to buy herself a house. She conveniently left out any reference to that, and instead made it seem like we were simply trying to strip her of what was hers. According to her, my husband and I had arbitrarily decided that all the saved money would now go to Olivia. What Melanie didn't expect was for me to find her post. To be honest, I wasn't even the one who found it first. A friend of mine sent it to me, thinking I should see it. And yes, it was unmistakably her. So I decided to comment on her post. I did it from my Reddit account, the same one I used to tell my side of the story here, and I didn't bother hiding who I was. The first thing I did was correct some of the biggest lies she was telling. I wrote that, first of all, it wasn't true that she got a full scholarship. She paid for college with the money her grandfather left. I also clarified that when Melanie used the inheritance money to buy her house, she had already spent the portion that was hers, and what she took after that belonged to Olivia. Most importantly, I explained that we never denied Melanie her share of the money. She had taken her part and then Olivia's, and what we were doing now was giving Olivia what her sister had taken from her. To my surprise, many people in the comments had already started pointing out contradictions in Melanie's story before I even commented. I noticed that some had already figured out that something didn't add up in her account. Once I commented, more people began to connect the dots. My comment was voted as one of the most relevant, and after people started learning the truth, most of the users began siding against Melanie in her own story. Some comments were even harsher than I expected, calling her the classic daughter who plays the victim to avoid taking responsibility. What shocked me, though it shouldn't have, was that Melanie never replied to her post again. After my comment, she simply disappeared. There was no attempt to clarify things or defend herself. I don't know if she felt embarrassed or realized that her version wasn't holding up, but since I left my comment, there's been no activity from her on that post. Now I just want to thank all of you who have been here supporting me and offering your perspectives, both in my post and Melanie's. If anything else changes, I'll keep you updated.
Daughter's post. I'm a 24-year-old woman, and I just graduated from university a few months ago. I was fortunate enough to attend thanks to a scholarship, which will be relevant later. Studying without worrying about debt was a huge blessing, especially considering the environment I grew up in. But lately, things have been bad between my family and me, particularly with my younger sister who is 18. To my family, she's the golden child, the one who can do no wrong. She's my parents' favorite, and that has always been painfully obvious. I grew up with that reality but did my best to be the best version of myself. My parents always said they were saving for both of us to go to college, and even though I didn't need it because I got the scholarship, I still felt like I was part of that plan, like it was something I earned through my hard work and dedication. I recently bought a house. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and I felt like it was a big step toward independence. However, the economy isn't in the best shape, and the job I got after graduating doesn't pay as well as I had hoped. Despite trying to negotiate a promotion or raise, I haven't been successful. This has caused me to fall behind on my mortgage payments because honestly I've had to spend most of my salary covering basic needs. The last few months have been tough, and the financial pressure has been overwhelming. Since my parents had always talked about a fund they had been saving for our education, and considering I never used my part of that money, I thought it would be reasonable to ask them for help temporarily. It seemed fair. After all, they didn't have to pay for my college thanks to the scholarship, so I imagined that money would still be available. I decided to call them. At first, I thought it would be a simple conversation, but their reaction shocked me. I explained my situation, telling them I was falling behind on my mortgage payments and needed a bit of financial support while I figured things out. I thought they'd understand that since the money was originally meant for my education, it would be reasonable to use it for something as important as not losing my house. Plus, I wasn't even asking for the full amount, just enough to get me caught up. My parents' response was cold. My father clearly told me that the money didn't exist anymore, that it had all been given to my sister. That fund had been for both of us, and now they were telling me it had been entirely used to pay for my sister's college. He said they had done their duty as parents for me until I turned 18, and now I had to figure things out on my own. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like all the years of favoritism toward my sister exploded in that moment. I couldn't stand the idea that, just because I had been fortunate and hardworking enough to get a scholarship, that meant I wasn't entitled to any of that money. It was like I was being punished for being successful at something. I asked them to reconsider, to have a face-to-face conversation because I felt that in person they'd better understand the seriousness of my situation. I thought that if they listened to me, if they saw me in person, they would change their minds. But when I arrived at the house, only my mother was there. From the moment I walked in, she treated me with a coldness and hostility I wasn't expecting. As soon as I entered, she reproached me for showing up without warning, even though I had made it clear that we needed to talk in person. She didn't show the slightest sign of support or understanding. On the contrary, she spoke to me as if I were a burden. I tried to stay calm and explained again why I was there. I said it didn't make sense for all the money to go to my sister when I also had a right to some of it, and that what I was asking for was only a bit of temporary help. My mother cut me off before I could finish. She said the money was for my sister because she needed it, and that since I had gotten a scholarship, I had no right to any of it. "You managed on your own once," she said with a sarcastic smile. "You can do it again." I told her I couldn't believe what I was hearing, that this wasn't fair on a basic human level. My mother, with her cold and condescending tone, told me life isn't fair, and that I needed to learn to accept that. In the end, I left the house without accomplishing anything. I don't know if it was naive to think they would help me, but deep down I hoped that parental love would prevail, that they would understand that I was truly in trouble. But that didn't happen. They stuck with their decision and told me I needed to move on and figure things out on my own. Since then I haven't spoken to them. I feel devastated and am trying to find another way to catch up on my mortgage, but the situation is still tough. I've asked myself over and over if I'm the bad one for asking for the money. I'm not someone who asks for help often, and I certainly wouldn't do it if I didn't need it. I understand that my sister needs the money for her education, but does that mean I had no right to any of it? Just because I was able to get a scholarship, does that mean I now have to handle everything completely on my own? So here I am asking objectively, am I the bad one for asking for the money that was also meant for me? Comments.
Mother, I believe this is what you meant when you told me everyone will know what kind of mother you are. There are many things you've left out in your story, aside from the lies. You didn't mention that the money you used to buy your house is what you stole from the fund your grandfather left for both of you to study. You never received a scholarship to study. You used your portion of the money and more. That's why you want more money now, because you bought a house far beyond your means, and that's why you're asking us for even more money. We haven't favored your sister over you. It's just that you want to take everything for yourself.
Daughter, but if you haven't favored my sister, then why don't you want to give me what you've saved all this time, since it was a fund meant for both of us?
Mother, because you refused to return the money you took from the inheritance your grandfather left. Only half of it was yours, and you took all of it, refusing to apologize or return part of it.
Daughter, it would be better to discuss all this privately since it's a family matter we should be able to resolve. But you refused to talk to me.
Mother, we have discussed it privately, and we've explained that it's only fair that now your sister gets the money because you took hers. But since that explanation wasn't to your liking, you decided to make this public. And we have the right to respond, especially when you've told your story with quite a few lies and omissions. Update 2. It's been 6 months since all the drama with my daughter Melanie, and honestly, not much has changed in terms of our relationship. For those who were following her post, you'll know why she hasn't responded further on Reddit. After all, she lied and omitted parts of the story that didn't favor her, and I think she knows it. People began to see through her lies, and that left her with nothing to say. She hasn't tried to defend herself or clarify anything, and she's simply remained silent since then. Recently, I found out something that, frankly, didn't surprise me. Melanie has lost her house. When we started suspecting that she couldn't keep up with the payments, it was confirmed. All the money she was supposedly using to pay her mortgage was being spent on other things. Meanwhile, she kept asking for financial help, expecting us to step in and support her lifestyle. She wanted us to pay off her debts and mortgage so she could continue living in the way she deemed appropriate. She didn't do this out of necessity, but out of choice, and honestly, I don't feel any urge to help her after everything she's done. Melanie has been calling us, her father and me, crying over the phone, trying to gain our sympathy. She says she's lost everything, her house and all the money she put into it. She partly blames us for not helping her when she was in trouble. But what did she expect? Banks don't wait forever. They want their money, and when you don't pay, you lose the house. Simple as that. What Melanie doesn't seem to understand is that if you don't manage your finances properly, eventually everything falls apart. In the end, she's left without a house, and all the money she stole to buy it is gone. It's ironic that she thought she could steal from her sister and continue living her good life. And now, all that money she stole is gone forever. But we've stopped answering her calls, and that has been enough for her to stop trying to contact us. Meanwhile, Olivia is doing well. She doesn't have her grandfather's money, but what we've been able to save over the years has been enough to cover most of her college expenses. She's been studying hard, putting in the effort, and she's doing great in her first year. I'm incredibly proud of her, and seeing her progress is the only thing that brings me some peace amid all this family chaos. If anything good has come out of this, it's that we've been able to give her the opportunity that Melanie took from her. I know this isn't a story with a happy ending. Our family is broken, and I don't know if that rift will ever heal. Seeing Melanie suffer the consequences of her decisions doesn't bring me any satisfaction, but I also can't keep rescuing her from her own mistakes. She's lost the house, she's lost the money she stole from her sister, and she's lost our trust. This is the reality of where things stand now.